Could you picture a medieval old town? Maybe a marina filled with superyachts, or perhaps a coastal path running along the edge of the Mediterranean? What if I told you all three are within a few minutes of each other? That's Antibes. Over the next 3 days, I'll take you through the town's historic center, some incredible coastal scenery, and a day trip that ended up being one of my favorite parts of the entire trip. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. Now, let's see what Antibes is all about. Day 1. Historic Antibes. Morning, Fort Carré. I started my morning in Antibes by heading straight up to Fort Carré way before I even touched the historic center. This fortress sits right on the hill overlooking the coast, and it's the absolute best spot to get your bearings because you can see the entire layout of the region from the ramparts. Looking down, you get this incredible bird's-eye view of mega yachts crammed into the marina, the old town walls, and the entire peninsula stretching into the Mediterranean. The fort was built to defend the border back when Nice belonged to a completely different country, and walking along the high stone paths gave me this wild realization of just how heavily contested this beautiful coast used to be. A ticket costs $3, and the gates open at 10 a.m. Insider tip. Don't even bother paying for the indoor monument ticket if you're tight on time. The most jaw-dropping panoramic views of the coastline are completely free to access along the public walking trails that wind around the outside of the fortress walls. Port Vauban and Le Nomade. From the fort, I walk down the hill into Port Vauban. Now, I'm not usually someone who gets excited about boat docks, but the scale here is impossible to ignore. Walking along what the locals call Billionaire's Quay feels surreal as you pass these absurd, multi-million-dollar super yachts that look more like floating glass mansions than actual watercraft. Right at the edge of the harbor wall, I ran into Le Nomade, which is a sculpture of a person looking out at the sea made completely out of white metal letters. You can actually walk right inside the hollow frame, standing inside the structure with the salty sea breeze hitting my face while looking back at the old town through the metal letters was easily my favorite visual moment of the morning. Plus, checking out the harbor and the sculpture won't cost you a single cent. Late morning, Saint-Bernardin Chapel. By late morning, I left the blinding glare of the harbor behind and plunged into the shaded, winding alleys of the old town to track down Saint-Bernardin Chapel. This Gothic church is tucked away on a quiet side street, and the outside looks so plain and blocky that I almost walked right past the front door without a second thought. Stepping inside, though, blew me away. The interior is covered in these incredibly rich, vibrant blue and gold ceiling frescoes that have survived for hundreds of years. The air inside felt instantly cool and heavy with the scent of ancient wood, which was a fantastic sensory break from the intense Mediterranean sun and the chaotic energy of the marina. It's a beautiful, peaceful little hideaway, and entering is completely free. Antibes Cathedral. Just a few minutes down the road, I came across Antibes Cathedral. The first thing that completely grabbed my attention wasn't the scale of the building, but the incredibly warm, sun-baked ochre color of the front walls facing the square. It feels absolutely nothing like those massive, intimidating stone cathedrals you typically find hidden deep within major French cities, fitting seamlessly into the relaxed, breezy character of the old town. I decided to pop my head inside for a quick look before continuing down the street. While the interior layout is remarkably simple and stripped back, it's entirely worth stepping into the quiet gloom to view the 16th century altarpiece. It was painted by Louis Brea, a legendary Renaissance artist from this region. Looking at the intense detail up close in the soft candlelight felt like a sudden grounding step back into time. Entry's completely free, making it a seamless, effortless stop as you move through the historic streets. Picasso Museum. The absolute highlight of my morning in the old town was the Picasso Museum, which is located directly inside the historic Chateau Grimaldi. This stone castle sits right on the edge of a cliff overlooking the crashing waves of the Mediterranean, and coughing up the $12 for a ticket gets you access to the first museum in the entire world dedicated solely to Picasso's work. Back in 1946, this artist actually used part of this massive stone building as his personal studio, working frantically and creating dozens of pieces right here during his stay in Antibes. Walking through the bright, airy rooms and seeing those exact paintings hanging on the same walls where they were painted gives the space a completely different, intimate energy compared to a clinical city art gallery. Even if you don't consider yourself a massive art enthusiast, walking out onto the outdoor terrace to see his sculptures framed by a backdrop of deep blue sea is an incredible experience. Lunch at the Provençal Market. By lunchtime, I worked my way over to Provençal Market, and it turned out to be my absolute favorite spot to grab food in the city. This covered market has been running for decades, and it gets packed with vendors selling everything from cured meats and massive wheels of goat cheese to mountain herbs and fresh produce. Instead of sitting through a slow, formal restaurant meal, I wanted to graze my way through the stalls. I bought a warm slice of pissaladière, which is a local flatbread piled high with sweet caramelized onions for about $4. I also grabbed a fresh plate of hot soca, a crispy chickpea pancake baked in a massive copper pan, which only cost me $5. The vendors are constantly shouting across the aisles and handing out samples of marinated olives to anyone walking past. It's loud, chaotic, and exactly where you want to be when you're hungry, keeping your budget around $10 to $15 total while tasting real, local food. Promenade de l'Amiral de Grasse. Once I finished eating, I scrambled straight up onto the old stone defensive walls along the Promenade de l'Amiral de Grasse. Walking along this path is wild because you're literally standing on top of history. On your left side, you have the bright blue Mediterranean stretching all the way to the horizon, and on your right, these beautiful old stone houses are built directly into the ramparts. I spent the whole walk up looking up at the shattered windows and balconies, completely jealous of the locals who got to wake up to this view every single day. It's an amazing vantage point to look down at the waves crashing against the base of the fortress walls. I just let myself wander aimlessly, following the natural curve of the stone wall while soaking in the crazy contrast between the ancient town and the open sea. Cap d'Antibes. Later that afternoon, I made my way down to Cap d'Antibes to tackle the Tir-Poil coastal path. The peninsula itself was where billionaires hide their mansions behind giant hedge walls, but the actual coastline is completely public and a blast to explore. The path is a narrow, rocky trail that snakes right along the edge of the limestone cliffs. The waves slam into the rocks right beneath you, and if you get too close to the edge, you'll get soaked by the sea spray, which is great given the afternoon heat. It feels like an adventure, and it's hard to believe the city traffic is just a short drive behind you. I originally thought about tackling the entire 5-kilometer loop around the whole peninsula, but that takes over 2 hours and turns into a bit of a repetitive slog once you get past the initial cliffs. Instead, I cut the hike short by turning back at the Smuggler's Cove beach area, which kept all the best cliffside scenery and left me with enough energy to actually enjoy the rest of the evening. If you want the dramatic views without the exhaustion, just do the rocky coastline stretch and head back the way you came. Dinner at Le Figuier du Saint-Esprit. To cap off the night, I treated myself to dinner at Le Figuier du Saint-Esprit, a Michelin-starred spot tucked away in the Old Town. This is a family-run place where the chef, Christian Maurice, runs the kitchen with his sons while his wife manages the front of the house. You dine inside a cozy stone courtyard right under a giant 60-year-old fig tree. They start everyone off with a complimentary slice of traditional onion flatbread from a famous local baker, which is an amazing touch. For the main course, I ordered their absolutely legendary signature dish, the Alpilla lamb. It's baked inside a sealed clay pot from the nearby pottery town of Vallauris, which keeps the meat incredibly tender and juicy, and comes served with a rich thyme flour sauce and truffle gnocchi for $84. Eating here is definitely a splurge, with tasting menus running from around $130 to $195 per person. It's a massive hit to the wallet, but the incredible depth of flavor in that lamb, and the fact that you can taste decades of fine-tuning in every single bite, make the bill completely worth it. Day 2. Cap d'Antibes and Juan-les-Pins. Morning. Get Antibes Coastal Walk. Remember how I bailed on the full coastal walk during the first day because I didn't want to burn out? Well, I woke up on my second day realizing I just couldn't let it go. I felt like the best parts were left unexplored, so I put on a supportive shoes this time and headed straight back to Get Antibes to finish what I started. Doing the full 5 kilometers or 3 miles from the official trailhead turned out to be a completely different ballgame. The trail is wild. It hugs limestone cliffs so tightly that the terrain changes completely every couple hundred yards. You find yourself squeezing through tight slots cut straight into the rock face, and then suddenly you pop out onto a high ledge with a straight drop down into the sea. I thought I would knock the whole thing out quickly, but I kept grinding to a halt because the views shift completely around every single bend. You get these massive panoramic views across the bay toward the mountains that make you want to stand there and stare. Garoupe Beach. The trail eventually dumps you right at Garoupe Beach, and arriving there just as the sun was starting to bake the cliffs was perfect timing. Dropping onto that sand after hours of navigating hot limestone paths felt incredible. A lot of the famous spots on the Riviera are massive touristy beaches where you're basically sitting on top of the person next to you. This place is tiny, tucked away inside a deep cove that completely blocks out the rough open water. The water's completely translucent to the point where I could see fish swimming around my feet before I even got past my knees. I was only supposed to check the place out and move on, but it was way too hot to resist, so I threw my bag down and jumped straight into the water. Afternoon, Villa Eilenroc Gardens. Once I dried off and grabbed a quick bite, I headed inland to find the Villa Eilenroc Gardens. The mansion itself is almost always closed, but paying the entry fee of $2.15 just to walk the grounds is the best bargain on the whole peninsula. The estate is built right on a high bluff, and the silence up there is shocking compared to the noisy beach clubs down the road. The whole place smells like pine needles, sea salt, and thousands of roses. I spent a long time tracking the dirt paths through these massive ancient olive groves that look like they've been there for centuries. Insider tip: walk all the way to the very back edge of the rose garden and look for a heavy stone walkway. It drops down a flight of steep, overgrown steps to a secret concrete swimming platform that the original owners carved directly into the cliffside back in the 1920s. Lunch at Restaurant Luigi. For lunch, I headed over to the Juan-les-Pins side of town to eat at Restaurant Luigi. It's a small bistro tucked just off the main drag on Avenue du Docteur d'Outhville. The setup inside is modern and informal, and they have an outdoor terrace right on the pedestrian street. The kitchen focuses on fresh seasonal food, and they rotate the menu regularly. I ordered the seared medium-rare red tuna fish, which comes served with a savory pink peppercorn soy sauce. The texture of the tuna is incredible, and the soy sauce adds a great kick without overpowering the fish. Mains here generally run between $23 and $33. It's a friendly, relaxed spot, and it feels completely separated from the loud, overpriced waterfront setups nearby. Late afternoon, Juan-les-Pins. Later in the afternoon, I crossed the peninsula over to Juan-les-Pins, and it felt like hitting a massive wall of sound and energy. The quiet stone alleys of Antibes were totally gone. Instead, I walked straight into a buzzing beach strip where the air is a heavy mix of expensive perfume, strong sunscreen, and scooter exhaust. Around 4 p.m., the beach club started cranking up heavy house music that I could literally feel vibrating through the wooden planks under my feet. The sandy shores were crammed shoulder to shoulder, and the open bars were packed with people sipping chilled rosé and pre-gaming for the night. It's flashy, chaotic, and completely over the top, but I had a blast just walking along the water and watching the stylish Riviera crowd swagger past. Gould Pine Grove. When the heat on the concrete became too intense to handle, I ducked a block inland to find some shade in the Gould Pine Grove. Stepping under those massive twisted umbrella pines was an instant relief from the sun, but it was far from quiet. The treetops were completely taken over by colonies of wild green parakeets that were making a massive racket overhead, blending right in with the thick smell of hot pine resin. I wandered over to the edge of the park to check out the famous Jazz Alwan sidewalk, where I matched my own hands up against the bronze prints of legends like B.B. King and Ray Charles pressed into the stone. My absolute favorite part, though, was hanging out by the red dirt courts. A crowd of local retirees had set up their own folding chairs in the shade to watch a game of pétanque. I stood there for a good half hour just listening to the sharp clack of the heavy metal balls colliding, followed by the players aggressively yelling at each other in French over who was closer to the target. Dinner at Cap Riviera. For dinner, I grabbed a waterfront table at Cap Riviera right on Boulevard Edouard Baudouin. The big draw here is the view across the water toward the Lérins Islands as the sun goes down. It's absolutely spectacular. The menu leans heavily into Mediterranean seafood, so I ordered the roasted cod fillet served with seasonal vegetables and drizzled with a rich chorizo oil for $29. The fish was perfectly flaky, and that smoky oil gave it a great kick. The service here can get notoriously slow and overwhelmed during the peak dinner rush. I had to flag down a waiter twice just for a bottle of water, but sitting right next to the waves makes it easy to overlook. Once you finish eating, you have to hit Pam Pam just a few doors down for a quick drink. It's a legendary 1920s spot that's been throwing a nightly party for a century, and it's famous for its live music and massive tropical cocktails. You absolutely have to experience it before the night is over. Day 3. Lérins Islands. Morning. Sainte-Marguerite Island. For my third day in Antibes, I decided to spend the day on Sainte-Marguerite Island, the largest of the Lérins Islands. Getting there is easy, with regular ferries taking around 15 to 20 minutes from the mainland. I'll be honest, I expected a nice island with a few walking paths and beaches. What I didn't expect was how easy it would be to spend an entire day here. Within a few minutes of arriving, I was already slowing down and paying less attention to my watch. There isn't a long checklist of attractions waiting for you. Most people come here to walk, swim, explore, and enjoy being outdoors for a few hours. If your first instinct is to rush through the island and catch the next ferry back, I'd do the opposite and give yourself plenty of time. The heavy exhaust and chaotic energy of the coast completely drop away the second you step off the boat. The thick scent of salt and crushed pine needles hits you immediately. There's no commercial clutter here, no cars, no roaring scooters, just quiet dirt tracks that lead you straight into the trees. Insider tip. The ferry terminal ticket lines on the mainland get painfully backed up by 10 a.m., and you can easily waste 30 minutes just standing on hot concrete. Buy your round-trip ticket online the night before for $23. You get to bypass the main queue entirely, scan your phone, and walk straight onto the deck. Late morning, Fort Royal. One of the island's main landmarks is Fort Royal, a fortress best known for holding the mysterious man in the Iron Mask. The history's interesting, but what surprised me the most was the setting. You have this centuries-old fortress surrounded by pine trees and bright blue water in every direction. It's not often you find a historic site that feels this relaxed. The fort also houses a small maritime museum, and walking around the walls gives you some fantastic views back toward Cannes and the coastline. Walking into the cold, damp stone cells gives you a genuine chill, especially when you picture someone locked away in total isolation here back in the late 1600s. But the contrast is wild. You step out of those dark, grim prison corridors and find yourself on fortified stone walls looking out over water so intensely blue, it hurts your eyes. Afternoon. Island walking trails. After leaving the fort, I spent a few hours exploring the island on foot. One thing I liked is that the trails never felt overly structured. Instead of following a single route from one attraction to another, I found myself taking random paths, stopping at viewpoints, and occasionally heading down toward the shoreline whenever something caught my attention. The island is covered with pine and eucalyptus trees, so there are plenty of shaded sections, which is especially welcome during the warmer months. The trails are completely dirt and gravel, cutting through dense tunnels of green growth. The canopy is an absolute lifesaver when the midday heat kicks in and the air smells incredible. This sharp, medicinal punch of eucalyptus mixed with hot pine resin, I ended up completely ignoring the map, taking random paths whenever I spotted a break in the trees or a rough dirt track heading downhill toward the rocky shore. Insider tip. The main path connecting the ferry dock to the fort is wide, flat, and heavily trafficked, which kicks up a ton of irritating dust. Slip onto the smaller, narrower dirt tracks marked as historical paths further inland. The ground is much firmer underfoot, the canopy is tighter and cooler, and you'll actually hear the cicadas instead of other tourists talking. Lunch at La Guérite. For lunch, I walked down to the rocky shore on the south side of the island to La Guérite. This place is an absolute institution tucked right into the cliffs below the old fort walls. The atmosphere's loud, incredibly scene-driven, and completely upscale, with upbeat music playing and massive white yachts anchored just offshore. The menu centers entirely on high-end Mediterranean plates. I ordered their grilled octopus served with a smooth potato puree and a bright lemon caper dressing for $46. The octopus had a perfect charred, smoky crust while staying incredibly tender on the inside, and the tang from the capers cut right through the richness beautifully. The place gets incredibly hectic as the afternoon goes on, and the prices are definitely premium, but sitting under the white canvas sails right on the water makes the splurge feel worth it. Late afternoon, hitting coves and swimming. By the afternoon, I was more than ready to spend some time in the water. The coastline around Sainte-Marguerite Island is dotted with small coves and rocky swimming spots, and the water here is some of the clearest I've seen in the entire trip. In some places, you can see straight to the bottom, even several meters from shore. I ended up spending much longer here than planned. Every time I thought about moving on, I found another quiet spot that looked even better than the last one. I stripped down to my swimsuit and waded into a tiny secluded cove flaked by flat white rocks, totally losing track of time as I floated in the cool water. If I were doing this trip again, I'd probably pack a towel, bring some snacks, and leave even more time for this part of the day so I could just bake on the flat rocks and swim until the very last ferry leaves. Insider tip: don't try to swim at the rocky beaches right near the main ferry pier. The water here gets churned up by the boat engines and the shore is muddy. Walk 15 minutes past the main paths to the southeastern side of the island near Point de la Convention. The limestone ledges are completely flat, making them perfect for sunbathing, and the water's completely still and transparent. Evening, dinner at Romagna Mia. Back on the main island of Antibes, I wrapped up the day with dinner at Romagna Mia, a tiny, unassuming Italian spot tucked away on Rue du Fersen. It's cozy, tightly packed, and run by a wonderfully passionate team that makes you feel like you just walked straight into a family kitchen. They specialize in authentic handmade pasta from the Emilia-Romagna region, and I ordered the tagliatelle with a slow-cooked wild boar ragu for $24. The pasta was perfectly al dente, holding on to a rich, deeply savory meat sauce that tasted like it's been simmering for days. The dining room fills up fast and tables are tight, so you're practically sitting elbow to elbow with the people next to you, but the comforting food and warm energy make the cramped space completely part of the appeal. Useful info for spending 3 days in Antibes. Best time to visit Antibes. Since so much of this itinerary revolves around beaches, coastal walks, boat trips, and time by the water, I'd aim for either late spring or early autumn. The weather is still great for swimming and outdoor dining, but places like Cap d'Antibes and the Old Town feel much easier to enjoy than during the peak summer rush. July and August are fantastic if your priority is beach days and lively nightlife, but they're also the busiest months of the year. Winter is quieter and usually much cheaper, although you'll probably spend less time in the water and more time exploring the town itself. Airport tips. The closest airport to Antibes is Nice Côte Airport, which is where most international visitors arrive. One of the things I like about Antibes is that you don't lose half a day getting there. Depending on traffic, you can usually reach the town in around 25 to 40 minutes. If you're planning to explore several places along the French Riviera, renting a car can be useful. Prices generally start around $40 to $90 per day, depending on the season and vehicle category. That said, if your trip is focused mainly on Antibes, Cannes, and Nice, I'd seriously consider using the train instead. The regional rail network is reliable, stations are centrally located, and you don't have to think about parking. Where to stay in Antibes? If it were my first time visiting, I'd stay somewhere around Old Antibes or Port Vauban. Most of the places featured in this itinerary are within walking distance, and being able to head out for dinner or even stroll without needing transportation makes the trip much easier. Expect hotels in the center to range anywhere from about $140 to $320 per night, depending on the season and hotel category. Cap d'Antibes is worth considering if you'd rather wake up closer to the beaches and coastal scenery, while Juan-les-Pins works well if you want more restaurants, nightlife, and a classic Riviera resort feel right outside your door. How to get around Antibes? One thing that surprised me about Antibes is how walkable it is. Once you're in the center, most major sites are close enough that you can comfortably move between them on foot. The only places where you might want transport are Cap d'Antibes and Juan-les-Pins, depending on where you're staying. Local buses, taxis, and ride-sharing services are all easy to use if you don't feel like walking. For the island day trip, ferries run regularly during the season and are straightforward to book. And if you're planning an extra Riviera day trip, trains are usually the easiest way to reach places like Cannes, Nice, or Monaco. Where to eat in Antibes? One thing I quickly noticed while planning this trip is that Antibes takes food seriously. Between the old town, the marina, and nearby Juan-les-Pins, there are far more good restaurants than you'll realistically have time to visit in just a few days. If I were adding a few extra spots beyond the ones already included in this itinerary, these are the ones I'd look at. Le Pêcheur is probably the choice for a special occasion dinner. Located inside the historic Hotel Belle Rive in Juan-les-Pins, it focuses on Mediterranean seafood and refined Riviera cuisine. Tasting menus generally range from around $120 to $220 per person. For something a little more relaxed, Le Vauban is a solid option near the marina. The menu centers around French and Mediterranean classics, including fresh seafood and seasonal dishes. Most main courses range from around $25 to $50. If you're a vegetarian or vegan, Healthy Lounge is one of the easiest recommendations in Antibes. Expect smoothie bowls, fresh juices, salads, plant-based mains, and vegan desserts, with most meals costing between $12 and $25. It's easy to see why so many people stop in Antibes for a few hours, but after spending 3 days here, I'd definitely recommend staying longer if you can. Between the old town, coastal walks, beaches, and island day trips, there was always something different waiting for me the next day. It made the trip feel much bigger than Antibes looks on a map. If you found this itinerary helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more travel guides. And if you're not quite ready to leave the French Riviera yet, Cannes is just down the coast and well worth adding to the trip.